There is a place where heaven speaks without words, not in thunder, not in visions, not in signs written across the sky, but in a silence so deep that it feels like the air itself is holding its breath. That place is not far away. It is closer than your pulse, closer than your thoughts. You have visited it before without knowing its name. It was there in the moment after the bad news, when no sentence could contain what you felt. It was there in the dark of your room, when you stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Are you still here?" It was there in the pauses between your sobs, when your tears spoke louder than your voice. That space, that sacred emptiness, is what heaven calls the room where angels wait. A room not built with walls or ceilings, but with stillness. A chamber inside your spirit where noise cannot cross the threshold, where distraction loses its language, and only the eternal is allowed to remain. You think of silence as absence. Heaven thinks of silence as preparation. The world taught you that when God is quiet, he must be distant, angry, or uninterested. But angels know better. They stand in that silence like soldiers at attention because they understand. When God says nothing, it is never because he has nothing to say. There is a difference between human silence and holy silence. Human silence hides, avoids, withholds. Holy silence gathers, surrounds, embraces. It is the pause before a symphony, the breath before a word that changes everything. In that breath, angels wait. Not because God is late, but because timing in heaven is an instrument, and your heart is being tuned. You entered this room without noticing. Life pushed you there, through exhaustion, disappointment, unanswered questions. The prayers that once flowed like rivers became short, hesitant, cautious. You began to wonder if God was tired of listening. You wondered if heaven had moved on. But while you were questioning, heaven was arranging chairs in that invisible room, setting the table with mercy for a conversation your soul didn't know it needed. Angels took their places in the quiet, not to replace God's voice, but to guard the space where his voice would soon be felt. Because here, in the room where angels wait, God doesn't speak to your ears. He speaks to your alignment. He shifts what you desire. He rearranges what you think you need. He loosens your grip on what is killing you softly and strengthens your hands to receive what truly belongs to you. You may look around and see nothing changing, but in this room, stillness is not inactivity. It is surgery. It is construction. It is heaven working in dimensions that your eyes are not trained to see yet. So if you find yourself in that strange, quiet place where your prayers feel unanswered and your future feels paused, do not assume you've been abandoned. You are in the waiting room of the divine, where angels stand guard over every second, and silence itself has become the voice of heaven preparing you for what comes next. There will come a time when heaven closes every door you try to open. Not because you are unworthy, but because you are being redirected towards something that cannot be reached through noise. You will knock, cry, wait, and the silence will answer you back, not cruelly, but firmly, like a teacher who knows your next lesson is hidden in stillness. You will call this season confusion. Heaven will call it alignment, because sometimes, to speak to you clearly, God first has to empty every echo around you. He takes away what responds too quickly, so that when his real voice comes, you will know it by the peace that follows. You may feel punished. You are not. You are being taught how to hear again. Your heart has been trained by the rhythm of instant answers, but heaven's rhythm is slower, like the tide, like breath. It withdraws, then returns, so that you may learn how to listen between the waves. When the doors close, you'll be tempted to force them open, to make something happen, just to prove you still have control. But control and peace cannot share the same room. So heaven lets the handle slip from your hands, and there, in the still air of surrender, you finally hear what the angels have been whispering. This silence is not your punishment, it's your protection. Everything you lost was not taken, it was released. Everything that fell away did so on schedule. The delay was not neglect, it was calibration. The walls around you are not prison bars, they are scaffolds around a soul under reconstruction. So breathe, let what is quiet remain quiet, let what has ended remain ended. Because in the space left behind, heaven is writing something you were too busy to notice before. And one day, when the doors open again, you will realize the silence didn't stop you, it saved you. There are angels assigned to silence, not to speak, not to act, but to stand. They stand in the space between your question and God's reply. They hold the weight of what you cannot carry, and they whisper strength into your exhaustion without ever being seen. You imagine angels as motion, as wind, fire, wings, but some of them are patience. They are the stillness that doesn't crumble, the calm that refuses to break, the quiet that tells darkness, you will not have this soul. They wait beside you in rooms where sound cannot reach. When you say, I'm done, they take those words and carry them upward like offerings, turning surrender into worship. Because even silence, when offered honestly, is still prayer. You don't always feel them. That's the design. Heaven hides its helpers so your faith can learn to walk. But if your heart has ever survived a night you were sure would end you, it was because one of them stayed awake while you slept. Their wings do not always shine. Sometimes they look like people who listened without judging, like a stranger's kindness on a day you were collapsing, like a memory that came at just the right moment to keep you breathing. That's how heaven disguises its guardians, in forms you don't revere, so you can learn to see grace in ordinary faces. The angels who wait beside the silence are not there to rush God's timing. They are there to protect it, because what heaven is building inside you cannot be rushed without being ruined. They hold the edges of your impatience, whispering, stay still a little longer. The answer is forming, and though your prayers seem unanswered, your spirit is not unseen. The moment your words left your lips, the angels began to move, not toward your desire, but toward your destiny. And that path always begins with waiting. So the next time you stand in silence and wonder if heaven has forgotten you, remember this: heaven never forgets its own echoes. And the silence that surrounds you is not empty, it is holy ground. Waiting is not a pause, it is a posture. It is how heaven measures your trust when nothing moves, how faith learns to breathe without proof. In every delay, there is design. And in every moment that feels wasted, something unseen is growing roots beneath your stillness. You see time as movement, but heaven sees it as formation. The waiting room of God is not filled with clocks, it's filled with mirrors. And in them, you begin to see the reflection of the person you are becoming, not the desperate one who begged for answers, but the quiet one who has learned to live in peace even when answers are hidden. The shape of waiting is not flat, it's layered, deep, alive. It bends around your frustration, carving patience into your bones. It folds over your fears, pressing faith into their creases. And when you think you're being stretched too far, it is only because heaven is enlarging your capacity to receive. You pray for a miracle, but God builds you into one instead. He rewires your sight to see beauty where there used to be panic, to feel peace where there used to be urgency. The lesson is not in getting what you asked for, it's in becoming someone who no longer needs to demand it. So if you find yourself between endings and beginnings, don't rush to escape it. Sit inside the waiting until it softens you, because waiting doesn't delay destiny, it defines it. And one day when you look back, you will understand that the stillness was not the space between blessings, it was the blessing itself. Silence is not empty, it is full of sounds, too sacred for the human ear. The hum of angels breathing beside your uncertainty, the pulse of grace moving through what seems motionless, the rhythm of heaven's heartbeat echoing inside your quiet surrender. You call it stillness, but it's music slowed down to the speed of trust. Every pause, every delay, every unanswered prayer, it's a note in a symphony that you will only recognize when you've learned to listen with your soul, because silence, to heaven, is not absence. It's a hidden melody that holds you together when everything else falls apart. You have heard this sound before. In the moment before tears, in the space between your inhale and your next hope, in the peace that came without explanation. That is heaven's language, a dialogue beyond words, a frequency only the broken can tune into. The world fears silence because it cannot control it. But heaven uses it as a meeting place. It's where your exhaustion finally collapses and love can reach you without interference. It's where prayer stops being sentences and becomes existence, where your being alone becomes enough for the divine to draw near. And once you've heard that silence, you'll never confuse noise with meaning again. You'll stop chasing answers and start dwelling in presence. You'll realize that every time heaven seemed quiet, it was actually singing over you, not to fill the air, but to fill you. So when everything grows quiet again, don't rush to break it. Let the stillness speak. Let the invisible music do what words cannot. Because inside that holy quiet, heaven is still talking, and your soul is finally learning to understand. When God grows silent, the angels do not panic. They do not ask why. They bow lower. Because silence to them is not confusion, it is command. It is the signal that something sacred is unfolding beneath the surface of human understanding. So they move gently, quietly, guarding what cannot yet be spoken. You imagine heaven's communication as thunder, but angels know that divine volume is measured in peace. They do not carry explanations. They carry presence. They do not bring schedules. They bring strength. They stand beside you saying nothing, because sometimes heaven's comfort is not found in words, but in proximity. There are days you ask, why won't God answer me? And somewhere unseen, an angel whispers back, because the answer is already happening. You don't need new instructions when grace has already taken form. You just need stillness long enough to let it rise to the surface of your awareness. The language angels use when God is silent is not spoken in syllables. It's spoken in atmosphere. It feels like calm after chaos, like a deep breath that finds you out of nowhere, like a warmth that doesn't come from sunlight. It's the quiet certainty that you are held, even when you don't feel held. Angels do not shout the truth. They translate it. They turn divine intent into human endurance. They turn waiting into protection. They turn disappointment into redirection. And they will stand beside your confusion until your soul remembers what your faith forgot, that silence is still supervision. So when heaven goes quiet again, don't fear the absence. It only means the work has moved deeper, beyond sight, beyond noise, beyond panic. And somewhere between your sigh and your next heartbeat, angels are still speaking the oldest word in heaven's language: stay. Every shadow is evidence of light. It cannot exist on its own. It's proof that something bright is near, even if it's behind you for now. You see darkness and think absence, but heaven sees direction. The shadows that follow you are not punishments. They are guides. They stretch and bend, pointing toward the light you've forgotten how to face. Even pain, in the hands of God, becomes compass. Even loss becomes reminder. There is still something shining. You've called certain seasons darkness, but if you could see from above, you'd realize they were corridors, not cages. Tunnels designed to bring you closer to the light that never stopped waiting. Because heaven doesn't remove the shadows. It teaches you how to walk through them without fear. In those moments when everything dims, angels step closer. They whisper, "Don't fight the dark. Let it show you where the light lives." You begin to notice small gleams, a kindness you didn't expect, a memory that warms you instead of wounds you, a peace that flickers even when you don't understand why. That's grace, disguised as survival. Every shadow carries a secret. The light is never gone, it's only redirected. The same way sunset isn't loss, it's movement. The same way winter isn't death, it's preparation. And the same way silence isn't absence, it's conversation. Heaven hides light behind shadows, so that when you finally turn around, you will be overwhelmed by how much never left you. And when you do, When you finally stop chasing noise and start facing glow, the shadows dissolve, not because they were destroyed, but because their work is finished. They have led you home to the same light that began your story. So when the night feels long, remember this truth whispered through eternity. You cannot lose what was created to wait for you. And somewhere behind every shadow, the light is still standing, patient as grace, ready to call your name again. There comes a moment when the waiting ends, not because heaven finally speaks, but because you finally listen differently. The silence that once felt heavy suddenly feels alive, like air vibrating with unseen purpose. That's when you realize the room you thought you were trapped in wasn't a prison, it was a womb. Heaven has been breathing through you this whole time. Every sigh you released was a prayer you didn't know you were saying. Every tear was water for a seed buried deep within you. And now something begins to stir. Not loud, not sudden, but sure. Like dawn, like promise, like grace finding its voice again. In that sacred stillness, you begin to feel warmth returning to places that once felt frozen. Your thoughts slow down. Your pulse aligns with something eternal. You remember how to breathe without fear, because heaven's rhythm has entered your lungs, and every inhale now sounds like trust. The angels who waited in silence begin to move again, not toward you, but with you, because you are no longer waiting for heaven. You have become part of its movement. The room where angels waited has transformed into the space where you and God share the same breath. You don't need signs anymore. You are the sign. The light in your eyes carries the memory of stillness. Your voice carries the tone of heaven's patience. Every step you take now echoes like worship, because you have learned what few ever do, that silence was never punishment. It was initiation. And when you walk out of that sacred room, the world won't understand you. You'll seem quieter, slower, deeper, but you won't need to explain, because those who have heard heaven breathe through them no longer speak to be understood. They speak to remind others that stillness was never empty. It was full of God all along. You wait for the voice, but when it comes, it doesn't sound like thunder. It sounds like recognition, like every heartbeat aligning with a word that has been forming inside you all along. Heaven's voice is not new, it is remembered. It is the same tone that spoke you into being, now returning to call you whole again. When heaven finally opens its mouth, it doesn't explain what happened. It reveals why it mattered. Every delay, every closed door, every tear, they are translated into language only love could invent. You don't hear answers, you hear belonging. The sound is not external, it rises from within you. It comes through your peace, your forgiveness, your letting go. It sounds like you, finally free of the noise, finally fluent in the silence you once feared. Heaven does not shout across distance, it whispers through nearness. And when it speaks, the whole of creation seems to exhale. You realize you never needed more information. You needed intimacy. You thought God would give you reasons. Instead, He gave you presence. And now every moment that once hurt has turned into a verse of understanding. Every scar now echoes His patience. Every silence now sounds like, I was here. The room where angels waited is no longer a mystery. It is now inside you, alive, breathing, glowing. Heaven's voice has merged with your own rhythm. You are no longer praying toward heaven, you are praying with heaven. Your breath, your stillness, your awareness, they have all become instruments in the same song. And when that realization lands, the need for proof fades completely. Because once you have heard God speak through silence, you cannot unhear it. It becomes the sound beneath your living, the steady hum of divine companionship that will follow you into every new dawn. At the end of all the noise, you finally understand. Heaven never stopped speaking. It simply changed the language. What you once called silence was actually the sound of divine timing, the soft hum of everything aligning exactly when it should. You realized the quiet seasons were not voids. They were wombs where new faith was forming. The delays that once wounded you were actually hands rearranging your path in perfect symmetry, and the absence you mourned was only heaven making space for something greater than answers, awareness. Now, when life grows still again, you don't rush to fill the silence. You listen, because you've learned that God doesn't compete with the noise of your fear. He waits for its echo to fade so that you can hear the whisper beneath it. I was always here. You look back and see the pattern. Every shadow led to light. Every loss led to depth. Every pause led to clarity. You are not the same soul who once begged for sound. You are the one who can now translate stillness into meaning. You can walk through quiet rooms without panic because you know they are holy. The angels who waited with you now stand behind you as witnesses. They watched your heart learn the frequency of heaven. They saw you survive what silence tried to teach. And now, as light fills the space around you, they whisper what every soul longs to hear. You heard him right. You've always been held. When silence becomes the voice of heaven, you stop searching for miracles. You begin to see them in everything, in breath, in laughter, in still mornings, in the way grace keeps arriving disguised as ordinary life. Because heaven never stopped speaking, you simply stopped interrupting. So you stand there quiet, radiant, awake, no longer waiting, no longer doubting, only listening, and for the first time, the silence feels like home.